At the beginning of 2022, I got my first feature film as a director of photography. I had been shooting many films prior to this, short films, over the last 8 years, but this was my first feature, and it came in a really weird way. I was on an Alexa Mini and Alexa owner group on Facebook, and a producer reached out on there and was like, hey, does anybody have an Alexa Mini they'd be willing to rent for a feature film? And I responded, said, yeah, I've got one. He was like, are you willing to send it to Nepal? And I was kind of like, I don't know, I feel nervous about that. I mean, if your DP needs a camera operator, maybe I could come with the camera. He was like, oh, well, I see you're a DP as well, and I think our DP's schedule might not line up. Like, would you be interested in coming to shoot? I was like, well, what's the story? So he sent me the synopsis, I read it, and it was totally up my alley. Around 10 years ago, I lived in India for about a year, and I made one short film in a tribe, in a village, film on my Nikon D600 with an iPad for audio. Like, that was it. So I love different cultures. I love different people groups, and especially like indigenous people. I think if I wasn't in filmmaking, I would have studied anthropology. I responded to him, said, yeah, I'd definitely be interested in this. And he said, okay, well, let me get back to you. 3 months goes by, I never hear from him. They end up hiring a different DP from New York City, and he came over, started prep for a month with the director, started shooting the film. About 15 days in, due to conflicts, he ends up leaving, right? The producer reaches back out to me, says, hey, this is what happened, and we need a DP. After talking with the DP and talking with the producer, director, and production manager, I determined that I could trust these people, they were good, and I took the job. And so they had already established a look and feel for the film for the most part. I could definitely bring something to it, but there was a certain amount of shots that I had to match, which is another interesting thing to have on my first film. Plus, they were so far behind on scheduling, I really had to just dive right into shooting. So we had hardly any days prep. So basically, I got over there, did a location scout one day, went around all the locations with the assistant director. He kind of explained the scenes. I had read the script at that point twice, maybe. And then another day, I sat down with all the department heads. And that's where I got like the director's theory behind the cinematography. And he had thought through a lot of that stuff, and he was trying to almost infuse the people group's culture into the cinematography, which was a very interesting concept for me. I had never thought like that. So the indigenous people that A Road to a Village is based on is the Rai people group. Some of the concepts of the Rai people group, one is that no one is above another person. So typically I would shoot, you know, two people talking. If one person is shorter than the other person, I would probably go over the shoulder and look down on that other person. And then the shorter person, I would tilt up and look up. But with this, when I was framing a kid, because he wanted everyone to be shot at eye level, because that brings in that concept of nobody is above another person. So that's one of the concepts. Another concept was that the Rai people are connected to the earth. They make their traditional Rai houses out of mud and cow dung. The way he wanted to express that was if we're in someone's house, the camera should be low to the ground. Now, I know that kind of contradicts what I just said, but it's more like on the wide shots, we would do like a wide Dana dolly with the camera almost on ground level. So if it was like 4 or 5 people talking in a room, which there was a lot of in very small houses, the camera would be low to the ground. So those were some of the concepts I learned on that second day of prep. This director, Nabin Subba, is very well established in Nepal, and he's almost twice my age. So I felt really lucky to work with him, and I really trusted him. So how Nabin Subba liked to work was on the day designing the shots and blocking with me. He didn't come to me with a shot list or storyboard. So every day in the morning we would discuss the different scenes, what's happening. We would get to the location. He would block through where he sees the actors moving, all of that, and then I would talk to him about, what if we shot it like this? What if we shot it like that? It's kind of that what if method, which I've heard about on a podcast before. So we would what if it, and then some scenes he would have a lot of ideas, and he would have almost like a shot list in his head, and all of his ideas I really loved, and it was easy for me to go with. And then when he didn't have that, he would look to me and I would come up with some the shot design, and he would be like, yeah, that's great. Or maybe he would add a little something to it, or maybe the same, vice versa. So there was a really good mutual trust between both of us, and I think that's what made it such a great first feature film to have, was to be trusted, and also to have a director that I really trusted his visual storytelling ability. So let's dive into these different scenes that I've put here and break down the cinematography. I'm gonna start off with one of the hardest things in my opinion, exterior night scenes. This scene, you have a crowd of people here underneath this little awning, and then you have this boy who is watching from outside the fence, and then he climbs up over and he ends up falling. So how I lit this scene and kind of my thought process behind it, this is a village. There's no street lights, there's no city lights, there's not any ambient light that you can use as a motivation. So I knew that I had a light from the moon and practicals on the house, which these practicals, one thing as a DP, talk to your art department ahead of time, let them know. We scouted this and we added in each one of these practicals, and I told them exactly the color. I wanted tungsten, I wanted older tungsten with a filament, not like an LED fake tungsten, if they could find it, which they did. So I think we got 3 or 4. I think there's one more right over there. And then right here, you can kind of see it. There's a matte light. It's the Vulcanize. It's like a 2x2 matte light, super thin. We put that up underneath that awning, in kind of hiding in the rafters. That's what's lighting her face, along with, and all of these people's faces right here. That matte light is just above her, and on the far key side there's also the practical bulb that's right there too, which is far key. So another big thing with being a DP is you get to suggest options for where your main subject is sitting. So I suggested her to sit there, and maybe we even moved some of the extras around so that we could have that light coming down and hitting this side of her face, leaving this side in the shadows. So that's how I lit underneath there and kind of the house to create textures, and so that we can actually see the house, we added those practicals in. Now, what's lighting him, what you're getting this edge light, and right here, all of that, and also lighting the tree and this side of the house, is a 4K HMI shooting this way into a 12x12 bounce. I think we even diffused it again by having like a 6x6. What I kept finding, and even this shot isn't perfect in my opinion, and I'm not as happy with it as this one. First off, because it is more frontal, but we still got some good shape on the face. But moonlight, to me, is very diffused. The moon is thousands of miles away, and it's bouncing the sun. I'm not a scientist, so it's really far away. So this, I'm thinking maybe these are all ungraded frames you're looking at. So I'm hoping that maybe in the grade they can even bring this stuff down, because to me that looks a bit too sourcey to be the moon, but it's as good as we could get. Over here we have another, this one's a 1.8K, I think, just shooting through like a 4x4 diffusion, hitting this side of the house and hitting him here, which is not as noticeable, I think, on that shot, but on this one you have these lines that are coming up from that. Diving into this next exterior night scene, completely the opposite of the last one. Our main character is going to the city to sell some goods, and he had a daughter that he hasn't seen in years, and he sees this woman of the night, and he almost feels like, could that be my daughter that I lost many years back? And so he goes and he talks to her. He's first on a bus. He's seen her at this bus stop a few times. So how I went about lighting this, with the feeling of a bus station and the subject matter, prostitute, I wanted it to be, and also to contrast what we had shot in the village, which was very naturalistic. I wanted to go with very colorful. So I had the art department put up these lights right here that you're seeing also here in the bokeh. Some of these lights were already there, but I knew I wanted some color in the scene. Above that though, that little LED strip is not going to give you near enough light to cast a bunch of color changing on the scene. So I had my awesome gaffer and grip put a Nova 300 right up here, which that was a crazy thing. That's one thing I want to say about the Nepali crew, is they'll do anything. There was like this balcony that they had to climb off of over here, and I don't even remember how they got it all the way out there. They might have rigged a C-stand to the edge of the balcony and then got that Nova up there, or some sort of clamp. I can't remember how, but it was a very tricky setup, and they did it for me. And so that Nova is on like a party mode, a slower party mode, so it's switching between colors. So it's mimicking what these are doing, but it's actually not really doing the same thing. Next thing I wanted, this is more just kind of painting with light, because the overall feeling I wanted was that colorful city life, edgy nighttime look. So this one was more just for fun. This one was just like, I want a slash going across back there. Also to make her pop out, but also to create that nice texture behind her. The main light source that I haven't talked about yet is, this is another thing, working with your local coordinator. As a DOP, there's a lot of things like you have to do behind the scenes. So one thing ahead of time, knowing from shooting those naturalistic scenes that we just talked about, this hill that I put that 4K HMI was pretty tall, but it wasn't tall enough to get the moon as far as I wanted. So when we got here, I was looking at all these buildings, and there was like a 6 or 7 story building. And I turned to the location manager earlier in the day when we were on like scout, and I said, hey, do you know the hotel owner? Like, is it possible that we could get a light up there? And he's like, well, let me go talk. So he went in there, he talked to the hotel manager, and we got a 4K. 4K is as big of a light as I had on this one. And really, it's the biggest light in Nepal. So I'm not working with like massive lights over here. But it was enough. We had a 4K HMI way up, I think 6 stories. and then it was probably diffused once or twice, and that's what's creating the general spill and fill. That's what you're seeing right here on her. That's what her face is lit with. That's what his back is lit with. So that's how I lit the scene at the bus station in A Road to a Village. All right, let's dive into an interior night sequence. This kind of ties into the exterior night in the fact that these people don't have a lot of unnatural light. So we have 3 scenes here, all in the same room, but lit in different ways. The interesting thing about this first scene is this is shot on my first day working on the job. And I had to match the other cinematographer's work. So the same gaffer was working on both, so he knew the exact setup. And so we had a light mat right up here, and then that's basically lighting his face, but there's also a fire that's right here for this angle and this angle, kind of back. You can kind of get, this is a similar setup. There's one light bulb in the room, so that's what's motivating this, but my gaffer nailed a light mat to the ceiling with a grid to make sure that it's not just spilling everywhere, that it's more confined to the middle of the room. And then we put a fire down here with a tube hiding behind her on a fire mode. So that's kind of what's creating this glow. But also the natural fire does a pretty dang good job. And you can kind of see on this one the results of the light mat up here, and you can't really see the fire. But the reason why we couldn't really light with fire only on this sequence is because there's a lot of people in the room. So we went with the source and then augmented it with our own light to spread it out and make it smoother than what just a regular bulb would look like. Now this scene, I love how this turned out. This is fully fire based, so the fire's right here and right behind her in this one. It's another tube right here. I think we also had one kind of hiding up there so that you're getting yeah, we did, because there's shadows coming from the top down, and because the fire would create all uplight, but that wouldn't be very pleasing. It's gonna look like a horror movie or something if you have like all the light coming from below. So what I try to do is kind of do a little 50-50, and most audience won't tell. That's the tricks of movie making. But yeah, for him, I just love how this falls off. I can't remember if we did anything else as far as putting like a bounce to bring a little bit back in, or if we put neg over here. I can't remember that, but motivating straight from the fire creates a beautiful look, in my opinion. I can't really go into spoilers, but they're having a very deep conversation. So I thought leaving it more moody and less exposed was a great choice for this scene because they're talking about something heavy. Moving on to interior day. There's a lot of ways you can do this, whether it's soft sourcing, which we did on other scenes, but I wanted to pick on this scene because it's probably the most stylistic or my most bold choice. Other times we would shoot a 4K and a 1.8 and put a bunch of diffusion in front of doors and windows, and you get that kind of soft ambient light in the room. But for this one, most of those houses, as you see, maybe you can't tell in this room, but there's not many windows. There's really just like 2 doors. It's all brown walls and it's very small, and the ceiling gets black from all the fire they burn inside because there's no chimney. So working on this project was really tough. I'd have to wear sometimes like a smoke mask because I'd be breathing in the fumes. It was really tough. My eyes would be watering during shooting. But on this one, I wanted to make a more bold choice. I went to the location and I noticed this one had a second floor window. So that's kind of just on my location scout. I was looking around and this particular house, out of all the different rye style houses, had this window up here. So I wanted to take a more bold approach. This is my gaffer, Bishesh Mahajan. And this is the behind the scenes photographer, Tikchok. They're standing in for me. And these are the two frames. This is actually the assistant director, Rajesh. And this is one of the actors. So these are the three shots. You have a two shot. So one person's sitting here, one person's sitting here. This character is getting hit with this beam of light. This character is getting some of the beam, but more just ambient. And I don't think that was our final exposure. This was just earlier in the setup, but either way, you can get the idea of what we did. Outside this window, we have a 1.8 shooting direct. I made sure that the art department continued to build smoke. And the funny thing about this is the room is so small and I'm shooting on Arri Ultra Primes. My widest lens is a 16 millimeter. We put the camera way back in this corner on a low base with a 16 mil in order to get this view that you're seeing here. There's a fire in the foreground and smoke to create this beam of light. And one scene, this actor comes up here and walks up, and that's where you get this angle. She goes up in the attic, grabs something, and comes back down. And I'm excited to see that in the film because I haven't seen it. But one other thing you notice, and a lot of times I use on A Road to a Village, is outside this door, they're getting it set up. This is one of the grips, is a net. Maybe a 1-stop or 2-stop net when I couldn't bring down the outside exposure enough. So we would throw a net outside. I think, yeah, there's one over here too. I think I see someone setting it up. So throwing nets outside and having this beam of light, that's basically everything for this scene. It's naturally lit, but I could take advantage of the location to make it as cinematic and as appealing as I possibly could that I couldn't do on the other locations. So that's why I went with a harsher, pointier source that also still feels naturalistic because there's this window. It's almost like the sun is just right up there and it's in the perfect spot and they happen to be sitting there. So that's how I lit my interior days on A Road to a Village. Yeah, so if you enjoyed watching me break down some of the scenes from A Road to a Village, be sure to check out the next video.